Hi guys! Fighting discrimination at NASA is one of the hardest things that I've ever had to do in my life. From this side, knowing that I won and looking back, it feels like I kicked butt. But it's important for me to admit and for you guys to know that I had my share of bad days too. This week I was going through some old posts and I happened across an old post of mine. It was from one of my worst days. It was the day I read NASA's motion for summary judgment. A motion for summary judgment is where your employer puts their spin on the undisputed facts of your case and asks the judge to find in their favor without giving you a hearing. By the time NASA filed its motion, I had already heard and refuted most of its pretext several times. But they just kept recycling the same old BS excuses over and over, and every time they did, I had to refute it again. Some things about NASA's motion taught me that we can be too transparent for our own good. And I'd like to share a couple of examples that will explain what I mean by that. For each one of these, I'm going to briefly share the undisputed facts, I'm going to share the way they spun those facts, and I'm going to share how I fought back. Undisputed fact number 1. A few years before my claim, I was rude to a coworker. As soon as I realized it, I apologized to her in an email, and I sent a CC to my boss. My coworker forgave me right away, and my boss emailed back saying that it was no big deal because she knew being rude wasn't characteristic of me. But after I filed my EEOC claim, NASA resurrected the incident with a twist. They claimed that by apologizing to my coworker, I had admitted to a long-standing pattern of communication problems that made it impossible for my boss to talk to me about reasonable accommodation. They actually spun one incident as a long-standing pattern, and an apology as an admission of that pattern. That seemed ridiculous to me, but because NASA put it in their motion, I had to refute it. So I presented a copy of the email that my boss had sent me back when it happened, indicating that it wasn't a big problem. And I also provided copies of my performance appraisals from that year and a couple years after. And every one of them, my boss praised my exceptional communication skills, which kind of shot a hole in NASA's long-standing pattern. Undisputed fact number 2 was that I admitted I had used my flexible schedule and sick leave to handle my medical needs before I had a diagnosis and could request reasonable accommodation. I thought if I was honest and admitted that I had used those things, my boss might be willing to meet me halfway and try to work out a solution. But I was wrong about that, and instead NASA twisted it and used it in their motion. They claimed that by admitting those things, I had admitted to long-standing attendance problems spanning years. And the only evidence they offered up was an email from me to my boss, letting her know that I had left the office for health reasons one day. Once. For my rebuttal, I pointed to NASA's own witnesses, who said that the way that I used my flexible schedule that day is the way our boss had told us to do it. I also pointed to all my performance appraisals again, none of which addressed any kind of attendance problem. In fact, in my last performance appraisal about 2 months earlier, she had actually given me an extra week of leave as a performance award. She'd even had to sign a certification saying that I didn't have any attendance problems because NASA policy said that supervisors couldn't give extra time off to an employee who had attendance problems. I mean, makes sense, right? And finally, I pointed out that even if I had attendance problems, NASA was still obligated to reasonably accommodate me. Withholding reasonable accommodation as punishment for a performance or conduct problem is illegal. Finally, when all was said and done, I was able to show the pretext and defeat NASA's motion. But at the time, it was deeply demoralizing how NASA seemed to get by with twisting things. So as you walk through the process, beware. Don't make the mistakes that I made. EEOC doesn't give bonus points for things like apologies or understanding our boss's concerns. You should never lie, but you should know that the things that you say can and will be used against you. And save the confessions for church.